The universe had never known a time when humanity was not beneath the heel of alien overlords. For centuries, humanity had been treated as little more than a commodity, an afterthought in the grand machinations of galactic empires that spanned star systems, conquered worlds, and subjugated civilizations. To the alien races, humanity was nothing special, a fragile, young species on the edge of the galactic stage, easily controlled and easily forgotten. At least, that's how the aliens had viewed humanity, until now. It began, as many revolutions do, in the dark corners of oppressed societies where the voices of the downtrodden festered and fermented. But this time, it was different. This time, the spark of defiance came from every corner of the human colonies scattered across the galaxy. A loose network of insurgents, led by some of the most brilliant and passionate minds humanity had ever produced, began to coalesce into a formidable force. The alien empires that had ruled over humanity were not accustomed to this kind of resistance. The Vortari, a race of towering, cold-blooded conquerors who had enslaved humanity for centuries, had long held dominion over Earth and its colonies. They had subjugated humanity through sheer force, suppressing every attempt at rebellion with ruthless efficiency. The Vortari were masters of war, with fleets that could lay waste to entire worlds in the blink of an eye. Their technology was advanced beyond human comprehension, and they ruled through fear. And yet, it was this very dominance that created the conditions for the rise of a force that would soon challenge them in ways they never expected. It started with the discovery of something extraordinary, something that had been hidden from humanity for generations. A scientist by the name of Evelyn Harper, once a prisoner in a Vortari labor camp on the mining moon of Astra, discovered an ancient artifact. The artifact, which she and a few other human prisoners had stumbled upon while scavenging for materials, was a remnant of an older, forgotten age, an age when humanity was still free, when they had once ruled the stars themselves. The artifact was a relic from a time before the Vortari, before the humans had been forced into submission. It was a weapon, no, more than a weapon. It was a key, a piece of technology that could unlock an ancient and long-buried secret, the true potential of human ingenuity. Evelyn's discovery was a turning point. She realized that the artifact was not just a relic of the past, but a blueprint for something much more powerful, a way to harness the latent potential of human biology and meld it with technology in ways that the alien races had never imagined. Evelyn's revelation spread like wildfire through the human resistance. Her findings caught the attention of high-ranking rebels, among them Leonidas Krieg, a former military officer in the Earth Defense Forces who had been fighting the Vortari since the first wave of colonization. Leonidas was a man of rare conviction, and he quickly recognized the significance of Evelyn's discovery. If humanity could unlock the power hidden in their DNA, if they could harness the secret technology left behind by their ancient ancestors, they could fight back not just with weapons, but with something far more dangerous, the very nature of humanity itself. The initial rebellions had been small, scattered, and largely ineffective. Humanity had always fought back, but their efforts had been met with brutal retaliation. The Vortari had wiped out entire resistance groups in a single, devastating strike. But with Evelyn's discovery, and the leadership of Leonidas and others like him, humanity began to evolve. They no longer sought to merely survive, they sought to win. The rebellion began in the underworlds of the galaxy's cities, where the oppressed human population lived in squalor, under constant surveillance by their alien overlords. The humans had no armies, no fleets of ships, no advanced technology to speak of, at least, not compared to the Vortari. But they had something that the aliens could not understand: resilience. And they had something even more valuable: hope. Hope spread like wildfire through the colonies. The human resistance began to gather strength, recruiting from every corner of the galaxy. Scientists, engineers, former soldiers, politicians, and ordinary civilians all were united under one cause. They had the knowledge, the passion, and the will to fight back. And for the first time in centuries, they began to believe that they could win. The first major victory came on the world of Helion 5, a mining colony located at the edge of Vortari space. The Vortari had stripped the planet of its natural resources, forcing its human inhabitants to work in brutal conditions. When the Resistance launched a daring raid on the Vortari's central command center, the victory was both a symbol and a turning point. It wasn't just a battle won, it was proof that humanity could strike back, that the Vortari were not invincible. The aliens, who had believed that humanity was nothing more than a subjugated species, were shocked. The rebellion had found its first taste of success, and with it came a surge of hope. The galaxy began to take notice. As the rebellion spread, the Vortari found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, a unified, determined, and rapidly evolving enemy. Humanity was no longer simply reacting to oppression. They were actively shaping their own future. They adapted quickly, learning from each conflict, improving their technology, and using their unique ability to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies. The humans, driven by the memory of their lost freedom and the desire to reclaim what had been stolen from them, became the most dangerous force the Vortari had ever faced. What made humanity's rebellion so dangerous was the very thing that had been seen as their greatest weakness for centuries, their unpredictability. While the alien empires relied on rigid military strategies, precise calculations, and advanced technology, humanity adapted in ways that no one could anticipate. The Vortari, accustomed to ruling through terror, began to panic. They underestimated the growing rebellion, thinking it would be crushed like every other uprising before it. But as humanity's forces grew in strength and number, it became clear that this was no ordinary rebellion. This was a war for the very survival of the human race. As the years passed, the human resistance evolved into a formidable fighting force. The weapon Evelyn had discovered proved to be only the beginning. Through the fusion of human biology and ancient alien technology, they developed new, devastating technologies that could rival anything the Vortari had at their disposal. They began to develop their own fleets of ships, not just as warriors, but as symbols of freedom. The humans crafted ships that were agile and unpredictable stealth vessels that could slip past even the most advanced alien sensors. They developed weapons that could disrupt alien technology and disable entire fleets with a single shot. Leonidas Krieg, now a general leading the human forces, had become a legend. His ability to outmaneuver the Vortari was unmatched, and his leadership inspired loyalty among his people. He understood that the key to victory was not in defeating the Vortari on their terms, but in forcing them to fight on humanity's terms. He knew the alien forces were built on rigid strategies, that they feared disorder, and that was precisely how humanity would win, by creating chaos, by throwing them off balance, and by never allowing them to predict their next move. The war raged on across the galaxy, and as humanity's forces grew stronger, the alien empires that had once looked down on humanity began to take notice. They saw the flames of rebellion spreading like wildfire, and they knew that if humanity was not stopped now, they would become a force that could never be contained. The Vortari, desperate to suppress the uprising, unleashed their full military might. But the humans were ready. The battle for the human homeworld, Earth, would become the most crucial turning point in the war. The Vortari amassed a massive fleet, intent on wiping out the last stronghold of human resistance. But they underestimated the human resolve. As the battle reached its climax, humanity's ingenuity and unpredictability once again tipped the scales. Through a daring and unexpected maneuver, Leonidas Krieg and his fleet shattered the Vortari command ship, dealing a devastating blow to their forces. The fall of the Vortari command ship marked the beginning of the end for the alien overlords. The rebellion had become more than a series of isolated uprisings. It had become a movement that united the galaxy's oppressed peoples. Humanity had ignited a fire that spread from one system to the next, from one planet to another. The Vortari's once mighty empire began to crumble, their forces unable to withstand the ever-growing tide of rebellion. The victory was not just military, it was ideological. Humanity had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a species could rise from the ashes of oppression and reclaim its freedom. They had shattered the myth of alien superiority and dominance, and in doing so, had given hope to the countless other species that had lived in fear for so long. But the war was far from over. The Vortari were not the only empire in the galaxy, and as one tyrant fell, others would rise to take their place. The rebellion, born from the fires of oppression, would not rest until every corner of the galaxy was free from the chains of alien domination. For humanity, the fight was just beginning. And they would not stop until every last star in the galaxy burned with the fire of their defiance. The fall of the Vortari Empire was a momentous victory, but it was far from the final chapter in humanity's fight for freedom. As the last of the Vortari fleets were scattered and their command structure collapsed, the galaxy remained in a delicate state of flux. The human rebellion, now a fully fledged war machine, had proven that even the most established and brutal empires could be brought to their knees, but new threats were already rising. The Vortari were not the only conquerors in the galaxy, and the defeat of one empire only set the stage for others to challenge the newly formed order. Humanity, now standing as the vanguard of an ever-expanding rebellion, found itself at a crossroads. The taste of victory was sweet, but it came with the bitter realization that the universe would not be easily tamed. The human-led rebellion was growing in influence and numbers, attracting countless species who had lived under the oppressive rule of the various galactic empires. But as more and more alien races joined their cause, the size and complexity of the rebellion increased dramatically. What had begun as a simple desire for liberation had now become an unstoppable force, with the potential to reshape the very fabric of the galaxy itself. In the wake of the Vortari's defeat, the rebellion faced its greatest challenge yet: unity. The various species that had been oppressed by the alien empires were not all of one mind. While the idea of a galaxy united under the banner of freedom was a noble one, the truth was more complicated. Some species, freed from their chains, were now intent on asserting their own power over others. In the wake of the fall of one empire, 1,000 new factions began to emerge, each with its own agenda, its own vision for what the galaxy should look like in the absence of domination. Humanity had fought for freedom from oppression, but in the wake of the Vortari's collapse, they found themselves in a new kind of battle, one where the lines between friend and foe were not always clear, and the very ideals they had fought for were now being tested. The galaxy was full of fractures, full of old grudges, old enemies, and new conflicts that threatened to tear apart the fragile unity humanity had worked so hard to forge. Leonidas Krieg, still leading the human resistance forces, found himself in the uncomfortable position of not only being the face of humanity's revolution, but also the de facto leader of a new, precarious galactic alliance. With the fall of the Vortari, the rebellion had become a powerful, diverse coalition, but it was not yet a cohesive one. Some species had allied with humanity for pragmatic reasons, others out of sheer desperation. They had fought alongside humanity for the promise of freedom, but what came next was uncertain. What would a liberated galaxy look like? Could it truly be unified, or would it fracture into endless wars between the very species that had once been oppressed? The new galaxy was a volatile place, and not everyone was ready to accept the idea of equality. Many species that had long been subjugated by the Vortari, like the Vervans and the Syrians, were more than willing to take their newfound power and dominate others. The concept of freedom was a distant ideal for some. It was about survival and conquest, about reasserting control. For others, particularly the humans who had spent so long under alien rule, the idea of true equality was paramount. Among these factions, there were even those who began to challenge the very legitimacy of humanity's leadership. Some argued that the galaxy's future should be shaped by those who had never been conquered, by the indigenous species of the worlds that had never bent the knee to the Vortari. These voices grew louder, questioning the right of humanity to lead the galaxy's new course. Leonidas, a warrior by nature, knew that it was time to step away from the battlefield for a moment and confront the galaxy's ideological war. As much as humanity had proved its resilience on the front lines, it now had to prove its ability to guide an uncertain future, a future that would either be shaped by cooperation or torn apart by internal conflicts. The war had been won, but peace was far from assured. The first signs of this ideological war appeared when the newly formed Galactic Council convened on the neutral world of Xander 9. The council, made up of representatives from liberated species and military leaders like Leonidas, was intended to be the governing body that would steer the future of the galaxy. But as the council began to take shape, it quickly became clear that not all factions were ready to accept the vision humanity had for the future. The Vervans, a highly intelligent and technologically advanced race that had been enslaved by the Vortari for millennia, were among the first to voice their concerns. While they had been instrumental in the downfall of the Vortari, they were also fiercely proud of their own superiority. They had once been masters of their domain, and the idea of being led by humanity, a species that had only recently broken free from slavery, seemed preposterous to them. They demanded more influence in the council, arguing that their technological prowess and ancient history made them better suited to guide the galaxy's future. On the other hand, the Syrians, a more egalitarian species that had long suffered under the boot of the Vortari, were firm supporters of humanity. They had seen firsthand the strength of the human spirit in the face of oppression and had fought beside them in countless battles. For the Syrians, humanity represented not just freedom but a way forward, a galaxy where each species could thrive without the fear of domination. The Syrians argued that humanity's leadership was the key to maintaining peace and preventing the chaos that would surely follow if every species fought to assert its dominance. The tension between these factions quickly escalated. The Vervans were not willing to back down, nor were the Syrians. Humanity, caught between these two powerful forces, found itself in the unenviable position of trying to broker a peace that was starting to slip through their fingers. It wasn't long before ideological factions within the council began to fracture. The war for liberation had been won, but the war for the future of the galaxy was just beginning. Leonidas Krieg, now a seasoned general, understood the weight of the moment. As the galaxy's newfound hope began to fray at the edges, he knew that humanity could not afford to let the rebellion devolve into another cycle of war. He had spent years fighting against the Vortari to ensure freedom for all, but now, that freedom was being threatened by the very same factions that had fought alongside him. If humanity did not act swiftly, the galaxy could plunge into an endless war for power, a war that would consume everything they had worked for. It was then that Leonidas made the boldest decision of his life. He called for a galactic referendum. Rather than allow the factions to continue their infighting and power struggles, he proposed that every species, every world be given a voice in shaping the galaxy's future. He knew that such a move would be controversial, and he knew it might tear the fragile alliance apart, but it was the only way forward. It was the ultimate test of humanity's ideals, whether the galaxy could truly become a place of cooperation, or whether it would revert to the same cycles of war and oppression that had plagued it for so long. The referendum, however, would not be easy. The Vervans and others would undoubtedly resist, unwilling to let go of their newfound power. But the humans had always known how to fight against the odds. Leonidas had led his people through the darkest hours of the rebellion, and now he had to lead them through the most challenging political battle the galaxy had ever seen. As the votes were cast and the results began to trickle in, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Would the new order forged by humanity and its allies survive, or would it crumble under the weight of old grudges, new ambitions, and the age-old thirst for power? The universe watched, as the humans, once slaves, now the liberators of the galaxy, prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. And though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear: humanity was not done yet. They had won their freedom and they would fight for the future, no matter the cost. The referendum that Leonidas Krieg had called for was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not just a vote, it was a reckoning. A moment where the galaxy would decide whether it was ready to embrace the ideals of unity, equality, and cooperation, or whether it would fall back into the old patterns of division, dominance, and oppression. The stakes could not have been higher. The Vervans, the Syrians, and countless other species who had once been enslaved or subjugated were now asked to choose the path of the future. But each species brought with it centuries of history, grudges, and ambition that could not be so easily forgotten. The initial reactions to Leonidas' proposal were mixed. Some species, especially those who had suffered the most under the boot of the Vortari, saw this referendum as a beacon of hope. To them, it represented the opportunity to build a galaxy where every species could thrive equally. For the Syrians, who had been allies of humanity throughout the war, the referendum was the ultimate chance to ensure that no race could ever again dominate another. Their faith in humanity was unwavering. They had fought beside the humans not just for freedom but for something greater, the belief that the future of the galaxy could be built on the foundation of shared values, mutual respect, and justice. However, not all were as enthusiastic. The Vervans, once proud and mighty, had grown accustomed to their newfound power. They had lost everything in the Vortari War's planets, colonies, and their once glorious position in the galaxy. To them, the referendum was an existential threat. Their survival, their legacy, depended on maintaining their position at the top of the galactic hierarchy. They were an ancient race with millennia of history and knowledge, and the idea that they would be governed by those who had once been their subjugated enemies was unacceptable. They had the technology, the military might, and the ambition to carve out an empire of their own, and they would not yield to the ideals of humanity and its coalition. The Vervans were not alone in their opposition. Other races, like the Ekrans, a brutal and warlike species that had also been once subjugated by the Vortari, saw the referendum as a threat to their own plans for expansion. They too had tasted power in the wake of the Vortari's collapse and were eager to maintain their dominance in the new galaxy. The referendum, they feared, would mean a redistribution of power they were not willing to accept. They had no interest in a galaxy governed by the principles of equality. They were warlords by nature, and the idea of a unified galaxy under peaceful governance was not one they could stomach. In the midst of these tensions, Leonidas found himself under immense pressure. He had always been a soldier, a leader on the battlefield, but now he was faced with the challenge of navigating the complex, treacherous waters of intergalactic politics. He knew that the referendum would not be easily won, but he also knew that it was the only way to prevent the galaxy from falling back into the cycle of conquest and oppression. The human rebellion had always been more than just a war. It had been a fight for a new way of thinking, a new vision for the future of all species. But whether that vision would become reality was still in question. To ensure the referendum went ahead without catastrophic disruption, Leonidas called upon the leaders of the Galactic Council, a body formed in the aftermath of the Vortari collapse, to gather on the neutral planet of Xandu 9. It was here, under the watchful eyes of countless representatives from every corner of the galaxy, that humanity would try to make its case for peace, unity, and a future without the shackles of empire. At the council meeting, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Species like the Ekrans and Vervans glowered at the human delegates, their resentment palpable. Even the Syrians, humanity's most trusted allies, looked warily at the proceedings, knowing that their own interests could be threatened by the shifting balance of power. The representatives from the human colonies, including Leonidas, Evelyn Harper, and other key leaders of the rebellion, sat at the front, resolute in their determination. They had already fought a war for freedom, now they had to fight for peace. The debate that followed was long and contentious. The Vervans were the first to speak, and they made their position clear. They demanded equal representation in any new galactic order, arguing that their technological superiority and ancient history made them the natural leaders of the galaxy. "We are the rightful heirs of the galaxy," the Vervans delegate, Lord Varro, declared, his voice deep and commanding. "Humanity may have won its war, but that does not give you the right to reshape the future of races far older and more powerful than your own." His words were met with murmurs of agreement from the Ekrans and a few other species who had been marginalized during the Vortari occupation. Leonidas, standing with the human delegation, took a deep breath before responding. "We did not fight this war for dominance, Lord Varro. We fought to give every species the right to decide its own future, free from oppression. Humanity has no interest in ruling over anyone. We want peace. We want a galaxy where every species, no matter how old or how powerful, has a voice. We are not asking for control, we are asking for unity. A chance for all of us to live without fear." Leonidas' words hung in the air, but they did little to sway the Vervans. They had their own vision of the future, and it did not involve sharing power with the newcomers. As the debates continued, the council chamber became a battleground of ideologies. Arguments grew more heated, and accusations of betrayal, greed, and self-interest were flung across the room. The humans, despite their growing strength and influence, were struggling to keep the peace. Meanwhile, back on Earth, a new crisis was brewing. News of the Council's deadlock reached home, and with it came a surge of unrest. Humanity had long seen itself as a defender of the oppressed, but now there were factions within their own population questioning whether the ideals of peace and unity were worth sacrificing for power. Some of the more radical elements of the human rebellion, disillusioned with the slow pace of negotiations, began to call for a return to more aggressive tactics. "If they won't listen to us," one leader, a former resistance fighter named Elena Wexler, declared, "then we take what we've earned. We fought for our freedom. Now we fight for a future where we control our destiny." Leonidas was torn. He understood the anger and frustration of the radicals. The process of peace seemed painfully slow, and with the Vervons and other species unwilling to compromise, the dream of a united galaxy was slipping away. But he also knew that resorting to violence and military action would only plunge humanity and the galaxy back into the same cycle of conflict that they had just escaped. He had always believed that humanity could be more than just warriors, that they could be diplomats, visionaries, creators of a new order. But in this moment, with the galaxy teetering on the brink of war, Leonidas was not sure whether those ideals could survive. As the council session stretched into days, tensions reached a boiling point. A faction of the Vervons, led by Lord Varro himself, attempted a power grab, declaring that they would no longer honor the terms of the referendum. They began to mobilize their forces, preparing to seize control of the capital planets in a brutal show of force. Their bold move sent shockwaves through the council and beyond. It was clear now that the peace the galaxy had hoped for was not a given. It would require a fight, not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of every species. Leonidas, with the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders, knew that the next steps would define humanity's future. The war for freedom had given humanity a voice, but now it was time to ensure that that voice was not drowned out by the forces of oppression and division. Humanity had learned to fight for its freedom, but now it would need to fight for its future, for the future of a galaxy where all species could coexist, not as conquerors and slaves, but as equals. The referendum, already a symbol of hope, had become the most dangerous and pivotal moment in the galaxy's history. And the choices humanity made now would determine whether the galaxy would fall into another era of domination or whether a new era of peace and unity could emerge from the ashes of war. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity had no intention of backing down. The tension in the galaxy reached its breaking point. As the Vervons and their allies, emboldened by Lord Varro's declaration, began mobilizing their fleets, the fragile peace that had held since the fall of the Vortari was now on the verge of collapse. Across the galaxy, the question was no longer whether humanity could build a new order. It had become a question of whether they would survive the coming storm. Leonidas Krieg, once a simple soldier, was now thrust into the role of a leader not just of humanity, but of an entire galaxy teetering on the edge of war. Back in the council chambers on Xander 9, the once hopeful negotiations turned into a battlefield of words, with the Vervons' actions pushing the already strained diplomatic situation to the brink. Lord Varro, with his calculating mind, had long been preparing for this moment. The referendum, which had promised to be the shining beacon of unity, was now a tool for him to achieve what he had long desired: galactic supremacy. And with his backing, the Ekrans, who were eager for conflict and control, began to align with him, hoping to use their military strength to cement their position in a new galactic order. The human delegation, led by Leonidas, was fighting a battle on two fronts. They had to contend with the diplomatic collapse, with species they had once called allies now turning hostile, and they had to ensure that the radicals within their own ranks did not sabotage everything they had fought for. As the Vervons and Ekrans flexed their muscle, it became clear that they were not interested in any compromise. They wanted power, and they were willing to use force to take it. Despite the gravity of the situation, Leonidas remained resolute. He had been through countless battles, but this was a different kind of war. This was not a battle for survival, it was a battle for the soul of the galaxy. He knew that humanity had been on the receiving end of cruelty and oppression for too long to turn back now. The ideals of peace and cooperation, while lofty, were worth fighting for. He also knew that a return to war could destroy everything humanity had built. If the galaxy fell into chaos, if the species that had just thrown off the chains of tyranny began to tear each other apart, then all of their sacrifices would be meaningless. "We can't let this happen," Leonidas said quietly to his closest advisors as they gathered in a secure room on Xander 9. Evelyn Harper, the brilliant scientist who had unearthed the secret to humanity's advancement, stood beside him. Her face was drawn with concern, but her eyes were resolute. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the future of humanity and the galaxy rested on the decisions they made in these next few moments. "The referendum has to go forward," she said, her voice steady. "If we let the Vervans and the Ekrans win, if we let them dictate the future, then we've lost everything we fought for. But we can't keep pushing for peace if they're preparing for war. We need to show them that we're not backing down. We need a clear demonstration of humanity's strength." Leonidas nodded. He understood. Diplomacy, in the traditional sense, had failed. The situation had escalated beyond words. Humanity needed to act decisively, to prove to the galaxy that it would not bow to threats, that it would defend the vision of a united galaxy at all costs. But the question remained, how far was he willing to push, and what price would humanity have to pay to secure that future? In the days that followed, Leonidas and the Council struggled to maintain a semblance of unity. The Vervans, led by Lord Varro, continued to push their agenda, demanding that the referendum be scrapped and that they be given control of the galactic future. They argued that the ancient, technologically advanced species should hold the power, while the younger, less advanced races, like humanity, should remain subjugated or be relegated to a secondary role. The Ekrans, hungry for power and conquest, sided with them, bolstering their forces for the inevitable confrontation. But Leonidas, always a step ahead of his enemies, had one final strategy, one that he hoped would force the hand of the Vervans and their allies while still allowing humanity to hold on to its ideals. It was a plan that could either make or break the rebellion, depending on how it played out. His idea was simple: the humans would show the galaxy that they had become a force not to be reckoned with, capable of standing up to the most powerful empires. But they would do it without firing a single shot. Leonidas ordered the human fleet, which had been quietly assembling on the outskirts of the system, to perform a high-risk maneuver that had never been attempted before, a show of strength that would make the Vervans and Ekrans realize that humanity was not just a flash in the pan, but a permanent, formidable power in the galaxy. The plan involved deploying the newly developed human stealth ships designed for precision and agility and infiltrating the heart of the Vervans' military stronghold on the planet Xeron 6. These ships, developed by Evelyn Harper and a team of engineers, were capable of slipping past even the most advanced alien sensors. The mission wasn't to attack, it was to make a statement. The humans would infiltrate the Vervans' military defenses, break into their secure communication systems, and broadcast a message to every corner of the galaxy. The message was simple: humanity is here, and it will not be pushed aside. The referendum will go forward, and we will fight for the galaxy we believe in. We will not be intimidated by any empire. It was a high-risk move. If the Vervans or the Ekrans discovered the stealth ships before they could broadcast the message, the results would be catastrophic. Humanity's fragile alliances could crumble, and the galaxy would plunge into an all-out war. But if the mission succeeded, the galaxy would see that humanity was not merely surviving, it was evolving into something far more powerful, far more dangerous to those who sought to dominate. The operation began with perfect precision. The stealth ships slipped past the Vervans' outer defenses, and the human forces on the ground infiltrated the communications hubs of Xeron 6. There was no room for error. If they were caught, the Vervans would undoubtedly retaliate, and humanity would find itself at war with one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. The message was broadcast clear, defiant, and unwavering. It rippled through the airwaves, reaching every corner of the galaxy, from the farthest corners of Vortari-controlled space to the recently liberated colonies of humanity. It was a challenge to those who sought to control the galaxy through fear and oppression. It was a declaration of humanity's resolve. Leonidas watched from a command center aboard the flagship Victory, his heart pounding as the broadcast went live. The moment stretched into eternity as he awaited the response from the Vervans and the Ekrans. For a long time, there was silence. Then, like a storm breaking, the response came. The Vervans, furious at the audacity of the human move, began to marshal their fleets, preparing for a retaliatory strike. Lord Varro's voice, dripping with venom, crackled through the comm channels. "You have made a grave mistake, human. We will not let this stand." But Leonidas, knowing that he had already taken the first step toward securing humanity's future, stood firm. "We will not be intimidated, Lord Varro. Humanity will not fall. Not now, not ever." The galaxy, already on the edge of chaos, now found itself at a crossroads. Would the Vervans and their allies retaliate with the full force of their empires, or would they recognize that the days of unchecked domination were over? Would the referendum and humanity's bid for a united galaxy collapse into another war, or could the message of resistance spark a new hope in the hearts of those who longed for peace? The answer, as Leonidas knew, was still up in the air. But one thing was certain: humanity had struck a blow that would not be easily forgotten. The future of the galaxy was now in their hands.